So one of the concepts in business that is not talked about often enough, and this is regardless of whether you own a contracting company, a roofing company, HVAC company, heck, even a marketing company like I do, and this is not talked about often enough, is systems. And as you scale, what happens within those systems. So one of the biggest problems that we notice with clients is as we start to scale their marketing, there's 5 core issues that happen. And those 5 core issues going back to their systems breaking significantly. And so essentially in this video, I'm going to talk about what those 5 main systems that break often are, and what are some solutions in order to solve those. What are my experiences working with some of the biggest contracting companies in the nation, such as $100 million private equity firms who own roofing companies, as well as owners of $50, $60 million roofing companies. What are they doing differently than you are as you try to scale from 3 to 10 million? What did my clients do when they try to scale from 3 to 10 million? And what are the best practices to follow as you go through this process? If you don't know who I am, my name is Manny Asadi. I'm the sales director and co-founder here at RoofIgnite. My team and I, we essentially scale roofing and contracting companies beyond multi-7 figures, and we do this by installing our systems into their businesses, our marketing system specifically. But obviously what we've realized is as we keep scaling their marketing systems, there's other systems that also fall apart. So we're going to be talking about those in this video today. If you have any questions, leave them down below in the comments, and yeah, let's get into it. So what breaks when roofers and contractors go from 3 to 10 million? That's our main topic today. So topic number one of the most apparent and I see this way too often, is sales systems breaking apart. Now, I had a client, I was talking to them yesterday, and it was pretty interesting. It was an interesting conversation. So they were a company who was doing about 1 to 2 million on average annually, and they took us on as a marketing company to help them scale from 1 to 2 million all the way up to 3 to 4 million, and that was their goal for this fiscal year of 2026. Now, interestingly enough, for these guys, what they struggle with, and as we started to get them leads, they told us that they're only closing like 25 or 20% of their leads, which was pretty interesting. So I personally sat down with them. I did a deep dive onto their sales, and I have a video about this on sales best practices, of course, but I did a deep dive on their sales and I realized they don't even have a script. And so the first thing I told this guy, we'll call him John Doe. It's like, John, dude, you gotta get some systems for your sales process in place. You gotta have a process where every time you hire somebody and you want to train them, you want to onboard them, it's the same thing as the other guy. I was like, how do you guys sell right now? I was like, yeah, we're just going based off how we feel. I'm like, dude, yeah, no shit, you guys are not closing consistently. We got them like 35 or something odd appointments, and they only closed like 5 of them, 5 or 6. And I was like, yeah, no wonder why. And it wasn't a lead quality issue, to be clear. For them specifically, it was a sales issue, and they were very aware of it. They're very smart individuals. They came out and reached out to me for help, and I was like, first thing we need is a sales script. Forget everything else. Your guys need to be selling the same way. And I was like, okay, how much is your top guy selling at? He was like, I don't know, 46% or something. I was like, nice. What about your bottom guy? Like 20%. Like, what's the discrepancy between that? And he was like, I don't know. I was like, analyze that. So my point ultimately is one of the biggest issues here, and I'll write this down, is sales falling apart. Because the same system that got you to 1 million is not going to be the same system that gets you to 3, and that's not going to be the same system that gets you to 10. So ultimately, what's important is realizing where am I missing something, and having the awareness to have that bottleneck analysis skill of like, okay, here's where I'm going wrong in my sales process, and here's what I need to fix within that. I'll tell you another common example of the companies going from 3 to 10 million specifically. What we notice is the companies who are doing about 3 million, they have this like, oh, I'm going based on my gut feeling. The process isn't really like concrete. They don't have like a 5 or 10 step sales process. They also don't have good systems around that sales process. So one of the biggest changes that we made for one of our clients scaling from 3 to 10 million, it was very simple, but it was simply installing more information prior to the appointment and then a better follow-up sequence after the appointment. So we have this thing in our business we call, and I'll write this down, we call them breakout videos. All right, and I've talked about this in my previous videos. Breakout videos are a simple concept, and all they are their assets, information people can consume, commonly asked questions that people have who, it could be easily answered within a short video, like, oh, what makes you guys different? How do I know if you're gonna scam me or not? Right? Like questions that come up like often with homeowners. And we make those into video formats, very short video formats, and we present it to the customers before meeting them in person, so increasing likelihood of trust. The other thing that I taught these guys, specifically scaling from 3 to 10 million, was adding selfie videos. I'm gonna write this down. So before meeting the person in person, we add a selfie video from the sales guy who's gonna go in person and meet the homeowner. And it's just like them introducing themselves. So by creating more impressions on the homeowner, you're increasing the odds and likelihood of actually closing that customer. And then a better follow-up sequence. I'm going to put this in blue over here. Essentially, the idea with a better follow-up sequence is actually having a timeline and telling your sales reps and training them with a system of like, yeah, contact the people 42 hours after the appointment, and then, or 48 hours after the appointment, and set a timeline to the homeowner. Let them know I'm going to contact you in this time. Every time you do a follow-up, like for example, in this instance, we told them to give value. We noticed that they were following up with people for absolutely no reason. So why are you doing that? Right? The homeowner doesn't care about your follow-up. So give value, some level of like information, whether that is, we, as an example, we had the specific individual send testimonials and send references, right? So I'm gonna write this down, send references, and that was very helpful, actually bumped up their closing rate. So my point being, that is one of the main issues people face is like their sales process completely falling apart as they scale, and that just comes down to a systems issue. So if you solve that, there can be so many things that you can improve within your business as you keep scaling. And ultimately, though, another tip I'll add over here is, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the ones that I gave over here, but an amazing one for you guys and many people that I'll see is actually doing like QAs. So what is a QA? QA is like simply having a process where you can record maybe your sales appointments that your reps go on, or alternatively like sitting down every week and figuring out what is the best guy doing, what is the best guy not doing, what is the worst guy doing, what is the worst guy not doing, and essentially just analyzing, right? Analyzing the process and figuring out what are the differences. And now with so many like amazing tools like AI, you could do that very easily. This could also, by the way, I'm just going to add, it could be like ride-alongs, right? This is an older method. Like you literally go with the sales rep on the appointment and like you just train them on the spot. It could be another thing you could do. So ultimately, having better systems is what's going to get you to the next level when it comes to sales. Now, the second thing, and this is an interesting one, that I notice when it comes to like companies who are doing like 4 million trying to scale to 10 is, and this is an interesting one, the operations of the company, like it slows down and it gets worse because the owner is still the biggest bottleneck. And let me explain what I mean by that. Here, let me write this down. Operation breaks because owner is the bottleneck. So the reality of life is at 3 million or even 4 million, even 5 million, I've seen some instances, you could get away with like being in the weeds, sometimes even like stepping in and doing sales yourself, right? Or messaging your project managers or talking to suppliers all the time, or getting the material yourself is like crazy stuff that I've seen. In these instances, you don't understand how much that slows down the business because you can actually view things on a larger horizon. I had a comment on Facebook one time, posted on one of our clients' testimonials, and it was interesting because I heard it say, it went something like this: "Oh, how can you guys have a company that's doing 40 jobs at the same time?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" I think that individual didn't understand the concept of like having people and leveraging systems, right? When it comes to fundamentally, and let me just be very clear in saying, I'm not saying that you have to be like running 40 jobs at the same time if you don't want to. But in order to get to that level where you can have so many jobs, right? When you're doing $8 million a year, you're gonna have 15 jobs running at the same time. And that's very possible. The reality of your life is gonna be, you can't be in the weeds with everything because customers are gonna get pissed, you're gonna miss things, right? And you won't ever have anybody of the right people in place essentially handling what needs to be handled that you might be handling right now, right? And so that is a big operational deficiency that we see with companies who are doing like between 1 and 3 million versus the companies that are doing 10, 15, 20 million. The owners are not in the weeds, they're not doing the roof, right? And so that's a big problem. Now, what is the solution to this? And this one honestly is a little bit simpler than you might think, and many of you don't have this, is an org chart. All right, what is an org chart? So very simple, like it sounds. You need to have a clear understanding of who does what, right? The interesting issue with smaller companies and small, medium-sized business owners is they don't have like org charts. They don't have systems for here's what my project manager does. The project manager could also sometimes be the sales guy in some instances, and like that's not okay. So you need to have a basic understanding of like, okay, this is how my company operates. So in this instance, for example, let's just say you have your COO, right? And the COO is handling, PMs, so like project managers. CEO could also be handling office, right? I'm just giving you an example. The COO could also be handling materials, right? Right? And so like, again, this chain could keep going down and keep going on. And then the PM or, whoever, like you have your director of sales here, right? Director of sales, and director of sales could have reps, right? But you need to have a clear understanding of who does what. And then where do all these things go? Where do all these things go, right? This is very important because if you don't have clarity on what people are doing, that's how your systems fall apart. And so I can't like stress this enough. Like many people don't even understand what people do in their company. And so don't be that contractor. Another great way to not break your systems as an owner as you keep scaling is track your data. Like, oh my God, how many people do I have to tell this to? Data, right? Data is critical. You need to know as a CEO up here, like what is happening in your business. What is your CAC? What is your LTV, right? Like you need to know these things. CAC is your cost to acquire a customer. LTV is your lifetime value, right? Your profit margins, right? Exactly, you need to know your profit percentages, your net margins, your gross margins. And that's what a real business owner does, is like you're managing all these different things and you're on top of things, except you're not the one who's doing it. That's the concept of leverage. So essentially, point being here, you cannot be the bottleneck. Use leverage. Interestingly enough, and we see this many times, this is the third thing that people go wrong with. Super, super interesting point, and you'll notice what I'm talking about. Some people, and honestly, majority of people that come to us, and this is okay by the way too, they are companies who have been operating on old marketing systems. So what happens at that level of like 1 to 3 million is your marketing that used to work when you were at 1 to 3 million is no longer going to work for you getting to 10 million. So what do people do? They try to double down on what they've been doing, and it usually just doesn't work. So oftentimes, like you'll notice people who are at 3 million, they're usually using referrals, maybe door knocking, a little bit of PPC and Google LSAs, and that's about it. And then they don't even think about like adding a new channel. But ultimately, there's only so much you can scale with. And yes, I've seen like one-off instances where there's like companies who are scaling their businesses heavily with like door knocking, right? But in many instances, a lot of people don't have the skill set to be able to diversify or just like niche down on one thing and like go all in with it. So they'll need to diversify is what I meant to say. And the reality here also is, I'm gonna write this down, marketing pretty much stops producing and you just can't grow. Because how are you gonna feed like 3 salespeople, right? Like to be clear, how are you gonna feed 3 salespeople with referrals? It just doesn't work. Or how are you gonna feed 6 salespeople with referrals? At some point, it'll be very hard to manage. It just won't work anymore. Your team will get frustrated. Your operations are gonna start dwindling down. Your operations are gonna get worse because you're not gonna have as many jobs. So it's a downhill spiral pretty much. So you just got to be aware of the fact that maybe this is the point where you start investing, and this is your solution right here, by the way, as a dead giveaway. Maybe you start investing into paid advertising, right? And I'm not necessarily saying do it with somebody specific. It doesn't have to be like, it doesn't have to be one thing specifically, but you know, maybe start running Meta ads, maybe start running Google ads if you're not already, right? And so this is where a company like mine is going to come in. By the way, if you want a good marketing company that has produced for over 120 clients at this point, there's a ton of good reviews that we have. Check out our link in the description. Go.roofignite.com/7-figure-roofer, 7-figure-roofer. And we can talk about how we could possibly help your business, obviously, if you qualify to work with us. Now, that being said, again, after you have reached the point where like you can't get any more referrals anymore, yeah, maybe it's the time you start running paid ads. Maybe it's the time where you start doing something that is, you know, you haven't done before. If you haven't done door knocking, try door knocking. If you haven't tried email campaigns, try email campaigns. There's so many different ways to go about it, but ultimately one of the most efficient ways that we notice client scale is like Meta/Google ads, right? Honestly, at this point, you could also buy lead packages. There's so many companies that sell leads as well. And so ultimately, it's about building the marketing system that's going to scale you to the next level. And so that's what's important. As a final tip, before I move on here, you will ultimately, at around 5 to 10 million, need your own really good marketing funnel. We have our own system. We call our Ad-to-Lead Qualification System. But for instance, the Ad-to-Lead Qualification System is essentially a funnel where you have control over everything. It is your ads, your own landing pages, your team contacting individuals. So it's very in-house style of marketing. And that's essentially something you're going to need because as you keep scaling, there's only so many aggregators and other companies you can rely on to scale you. So you need to build something in-house that you can have for a lifetime. Something that tracks your cost per lead, your cost per qualified lead, right? It tracks your CAC, your sit-down costs, your show rates. So many different things you should be tracking at this stage as you get to $5-10 million because now these numbers are actually important. All right, stepping into zone of the fourth biggest system issue that I see with companies that are doing about that $1 to $3 million range, and this one, oh God, it's an interesting one. Finances. All right, so we briefly talked about data. You'll notice like companies at this point, like they'll loosely be tracking what their gross profits are and like what their net margins are, but they don't really know how much money they're making. If you ask them, they just give you a ballpark number. And again, I mean this in the nicest way possible, but the reality is when you're doing 3 million and now you're getting to like 5 million, you're doing a couple $100,000 a month. And like now you're about to crack $1 million a month when you get to like 10-12 million. It's going to be quite a bit of importance and there's quite a bit of importance that goes into the finances. So like actually understanding what your business is making in terms of profits, what your business is losing every single month in terms of a specific channel, a lead channel per se. And your job as the CEO is to like look at these data and look at these numbers and say, okay, here's where we're going to cut costs. Here's where we're going to add on to it. There's so many clients that we have to do their P&Ls for them to show them that they're actually making money with our system. It's ridiculous because they don't do that themselves and they operate based off of emotions. If you don't have your finances figured out, if you don't have your data, what you end up doing is you operate, and this is very bad, based off emotion. And the last thing you want to be doing as a $10 to $12 million a year business owner is be operating as somebody who's operating based off emotions, your feelings. You have to be operating based off of data. Now, this is a marketing example that I gave you, but there's also the instance of like people have sales reps who are getting paid a little too much maybe, or people have sales reps who don't get paid enough and they don't even know which rep makes the most amount of money, which rep is doing the best, who's pulling in the most amount of cash collected. They are not tracking these different things. So they don't know essentially who makes how much, right? They don't know who makes how much money. And that's a big problem. Don't let that slide. At this point, I would say when you're around that $5 to $10 million mark, it's a good idea to hire a CFO, somebody who's consistently keeping track of things for you, or some sort of a bookkeeper that, again, can keep track of your numbers. We talked about CRMs briefly in our channel, but at this point, you should also get some CRMs so you can start tracking your data. Over here, I mentioned data. I'm going to also add the fact that you should have a CRM. It could be like Job Nimbus, right? That's a good one. I'm not affiliated with any of these, so I'm just giving you some off the top of my head. Job Nimbus, Service Titan, Roofer, there's so many different CRMs you could do, but it's important for you to have a dashboard almost. Like we'll call this a dashboard, like a CEO dashboard where we can like look at everything and say, okay, here's what we're going to do. Ultimately, keeping track of your data and finances, right, is what's going to get you to the next level because not enough people talk about this. This also helps you decide, by the way, where to allocate your money, right? So if one month you're doing amazing, you're making a bunch of money, maybe you're underspending on marketing. Maybe you could double down on your marketing, right? Maybe you could hire more sales reps. Maybe you could hire more team and crews, right? That's why it's important to keep track of your finances, because if you don't know those things, you can't really grow. So it's a matter of getting clarity so you can take things to the next level. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about, and this one is oftentimes neglected like severely, and people don't actually realize how important this is. I know I said that about finances, but this one is truly like a big one. And what this one equates down to, people don't even think about this, especially contractors. It is team culture and hiring processes. All right, so what do I mean by this? We're going to talk about this. So team culture and hiring processes. So this is kind of the same thing as what I was talking about over here briefly, which is like sales falling apart. The important thing about this one though is many people, their hiring processes fall apart as they scale. Right? So like that's a big bottleneck. They don't have an actual like solid process, and they don't have a good solid process for like onboarding people and building culture, and they don't have a solid process for setting visions and goals. And as soon as they have new team members come on, they either suck, or even if they're good, they leave. And it's a big issue. Because imagine it like this, like when you're at 3 million, right? I'll show you guys visually. At 3 million, here's your sales team. You got maybe like 3 guys, right? Like the best case scenario, there's you, one person who's you. There's like there's like one office manager, and then maybe, you know, you have a COO if you're lucky, or maybe you have a business partner, right? There's 1 or 2 of you guys. In this case, like I'll say COO, and you have 1 guy who handles marketing, right? And that's pretty much the game. And then obviously you have your crews too, right? And then there's like crews. Now, when you're at, I'll write the thing there, but you're at 10 million, right? The company structure changes severely, like by a lot. So now you have like 10 sales guys, right? Possibly, right? Like 7 to 10 sales guys, 7 to 10 reps doing sales. Now there is possibly you and a business partner, obviously. Maybe it's just you, right? It doesn't really matter. One of you. Now you have a CFO, right? You have a COO, right? And you also have depending on the scale of your company, a CTO, right? Depending on, again, what you do. And then you got marketing, you got a whole department for marketing, you got your head of marketing, you got your marketing director, you got people under that, you got your office, crews, etc., blah, blah, blah. You guys get the point. There's so many different things that you're dealing with, probably a team of like 30 people at this point, right? Not including your crews. And here you're only dealing with like 8 people. There's a big difference. So my point is, when you get to that level, you got to have a system in place. And again, this is why I say like your systems for hiring and team culture, but you got to have a system in place where anytime somebody comes on, number one, are they happy, right? Are you picking the right people? And are they happy when they join in? Or are you completely just picking the wrong people, and then when they come in, are they just like coasting by? When you do have a system in place and you do have a framework for how you hire, you'll always have like 100% of times, like, or at least like 80% of the time, you'll have really good people who come on. So like A players, you got to make sure you hire A players. And then once you hire those A players, they stick around longer, right? So they stick around longer. And you want that, right? You don't want your best players to be churning. So how do you do this? How do you actually like deploy this into your business? Well, SOPs, right? You need to have SOPs. You need to have playbooks. You need to have hiring guidelines. And most importantly, clear KPIs. And also how to hit those KPIs, right? Many people forget, like you could tell people, oh, do this and this and this and close at 30%, but they don't know how to do it because they don't have a playbook. They don't have SOPs, right? SOPs, like standard operating procedures, right? How to hit KPIs, right? Many people don't tell their reps or their COOs or CFOs how to hit their KPIs. So ultimately, you got to have those systems built out. And you wouldn't imagine the amount of people who don't have these things in place. They don't have a way to track things. They don't know what people are supposed to do. Things are just operating based off of like hope. Oh, this guy, hopefully this guy gets it done. And then you check and like nobody's doing what they're supposed to do. But that's not their issue. That's your issue for not having a system to flag that right away. Right? So ultimately, my point is you need to build these processes in place because that's what differentiates a company who's doing 3 million, 1 million, 2 million with a company who's doing 10, 12, 15, who's going to scale to 20 and 30 million and ultimately exit for like 50 million. Now, I also want to share a decision framework that we use in our business, and this is a interesting one for you to look at. We call this the speed up, steady, and slow down decision framework. So what does this stand for? Right? You have obviously like speed up, you have steady, and you have slow down. This stands for at any point in your business, you have many different systems, like you have your marketing system, your sales system, you have your operational system. And at some points, you'll need to speed one up, you need to maintain one and fix a few things, and then you need to slow down because you're going too quickly. Oftentimes, a lot of you guys are here, like 99% of you guys are here. You got to speed up, right? Sometimes we have people who scale too aggressively. They got to do this one here. They got to slow down, right? But my point ultimately is you got to decide at what point do I speed up, at what point do I slow down, and at what point do I keep it steady. Let me give you an example. I had a client of mine that came to me. These guys were doing about 5 million at the time, right? I had this one client, 5 million. And again, honestly, like numbers, nothing like crazy impressive, but the reality was their operations were severely breaking, right? Like operations, like they were just like having homeowners complain left and right, and they're getting like negative Google reviews. Like, and we did not want that. That's horrible for marketing. Negative reviews, right? And operations was just like breaking apart. So we told them, hey guys, like I think at this point, like it doesn't make any sense for us to ramp ad spend and spend more money on ads. You got to slow down. You got to figure out what the heck you got to do with your operations, get some better crews, and then we're going to ramp this back up, right? They were just selling, 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 but they're not doing any sort of like slow down, figure out how to get feedback from like customers. What do we need to improve? And that causes a lot of people to go down the drain very quickly. It's the last thing that you want. You don't want your customers complaining about you because you're never going to have a good reputation ever again. Your reputation is made, it's not bought. So ultimately, what we love to do is we like to teach this framework to our clients, right? The speed up, steady, slow down framework so they can understand and do a bottleneck analysis on every single part of their business. For example, if you look at your data and you see, okay, you know what? We can spend more money on marketing. Spend more money on marketing, speed it up. But then if you are at a point where like your leads are all becoming shit, then you want to steady it out, right? Figure out why your lead's so bad and then fix that and then speed up again, right? It's all a game that you have to play properly. Otherwise, you go down the hole. Now, I hope these lessons have been helpful for you. There's a lot of different things that I could share that I will in future videos. But if there's any specific questions that you have that you want answered, or if you want to learn more about what it is that we do and how we can help your business scale to the next level, your contracting business, click the link below, right? It's a link that takes you to a page where you fill out your information, tell us who you are, why you're reaching out, and how we could possibly help you. And if we are a good fit, I would love to have my team hop on a call with you, get you on the next slide of this conversation, and we can hopefully provide a lot more value for you. It's been Manny. If there's any questions, again, comment down below. I'll personally answer it. And yeah, we'll have a good conversation soon, hopefully. And yeah, stay tuned for the next video. We'll talk soon.